140 million years ago, the Earth was a greenhouse of giant ferns and towering conifers. The air was thick, humid, and alive with the buzz of the first insects. And in that ancient world, a wasp, yes, a wasp, did something no creature had ever done before. She stopped hunting. She started nurturing. She laid her eggs, and instead of abandoning them, she fed them. She protected them. She built a nest. This was the birth of motherhood in the insect world. And from that single fragile act, an idea was born. An idea that would spread across every continent, survive every mass extinction, and build a network so vast that scientists today call it the superorganism. But let's be clear, this wasn't a peaceful evolution. This was a descent from the heavens into the dirt. They built cities before we had language. They waged wars before we invented the spear. And somewhere, deep beneath your feet, right now, an empire is expanding. An empire that doesn't sleep, doesn't stop, and doesn't even know you exist. But here's the question that will haunt you. What if their story is older, stranger, and more terrifying than anything we've ever been taught? The earliest ants were not ground dwellers. They were descendants of those wasps that lived in the trees, high above the predators. Their nests were aerial fortresses. But something changed. Maybe a drought, maybe a forest fire, maybe a predator that learned to climb. Whatever it was, the first ants made a choice that would define their species forever. They came down. They crawled into the soil. They traded the sunlight for darkness. And in that darkness, they found something incredible. Underground, there was safety. Underground, there was temperature control. Underground, there was an endless supply of food, if you knew how to farm. And that's exactly what they learned to do. While humans were still millions of years away from planting a single seed, ants were already cultivating fungus. They were herding aphids like cattle. They were building highways, ventilation shafts, and waste disposal systems. They created agriculture before we existed. They created slavery before our first kings. But here's where the story twists into something unforgettable. Because the ant civilization didn't just adapt, it became a machine. Every ant born into a colony is not an individual. It is a cell in a body. The queen is the heart. The workers are the blood. The soldiers are the immune system. And the colony itself is a single, thinking entity. They communicate through pheromones, chemical signals that carry complex messages. Follow me, danger, food here, attack. They have no leaders, no debates, no hesitation. They are a hive mind, and they have been perfecting this system for over 100 million years. Think about that. 100 million years of war, cooperation, and sacrifice. They have no concept of self. A worker ant will literally rupture its own body to protect the nest. It will starve itself to feed the queen. It will march into fire without a second thought. And we call them primitive. And from the ashes, a new kind of ant civilization was born. One that learned to fear. One that learned to hide. One that learned to wage war not just for food, but for survival. But that's only the beginning. Because the ants that survived that ancient catastrophe didn't just rebuild. They evolved into something darker. Something that, if you look closely enough, might remind you of us. Now, we step into that darkness. The ants that emerged after the plague were not the same creatures that once ruled the underground. They were hardened, paranoid, ruthless, and they carried a memory in their genes, a ghost of the catastrophe that almost erased them. That memory made them do something unprecedented. They stopped expanding blindly. They started planning. ants began to develop strategies. They built secondary nests. They created escape tunnels. They learned to isolate their queens in impregnable chambers, surrounded by layers of soldiers who would never see the sunlight. They turned their colonies into fortresses, and then they turned their neighbors into enemies. Because the plague taught them one brutal lesson. The greatest threat to an ant colony is not starvation. It's not the weather. It's other ants. When resources run low, when territory shrinks, when the nest is overcrowded, there is no negotiation. There are no peace treaties. There is only war. And ants have been waging war for over 100 million years, longer than any human civilization has ever existed. But here's where the story takes a turn that is truly chilling. Because the ants didn't just learn to fight, they learned to enslave. There are species of ants today that cannot feed themselves. They cannot raise their own young. They cannot even dig their own nests. Why? Because they evolved to depend entirely on the labor of other ants. They raid neighboring colonies, steal the pupae, and raise them as slaves. The slaves work, the slaves feed, the slaves die. And the masters? The masters do nothing but reproduce and wage war. This is not a metaphor. This is biology. This is evolution. And it happened without a single ant ever thinking, I am the master. It happened because the system demanded it. Because the superorganism, once broken by the plague, rebuilt itself into a machine of pure efficiency. And efficiency, in nature, has no morality. Now, look at the world around you. Look at the highways that carry goods across continents. Look at the warehouses that never sleep. Look at the algorithms that decide what you see, what you buy, and what you think. Look at the way we organize ourselves into nations, corporations, and digital colonies that demand our constant attention. Look at the way we fight over resources, how we build walls, how we fear the other. Are we really so different from the ants? Or did we simply take their blueprint and paint it with consciousness? The ants built their civilization out of instinct. We built ours out of choice. But the more we optimize, the more we automate, the more we sacrifice individuality for efficiency, the more we become them. The question is not whether ants are primitive. The question is whether we are evolving toward them or away from them. Because the ant civilization has already reached its final form. It has been stable for millions of years. It will never invent a spaceship. It will never write a poem. It will never question the meaning of its existence. But it will never destroy itself either. It has achieved the one thing we chase, but can never catch. Perfect balance, perfect stability, perfect stillness. From the heavens to eternal labor. From the first queen to the last worker. The history of the ant civilization is written in sacrifice, in silence, and in survival. And we are just beginning to read it.